Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure to rise today to speak on Bill C-44, an act to amend the Canadian Security Intelligence Service Act and other acts. And Mr. Speaker, it's always a pleasure to be able to stand up in this House and to represent the voices from the riding of Surrey, Newton and North Delta. And I want to say that, Mr. Speaker, let's get this on the table right from the beginning. There is nobody on this side of the House that supports any terrorists or any acts of terrorism. So now that we have got that out of the way, before my friends across there start to have conversations and yelling things, I just wanted to make that clear. All my life, I have worked for peace. I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother, I have been a teacher for most of my life. And I can tell you, I abhor acts of violence. And occasionally to be accused of, oh yeah, you just like terrorists, those kind of things don't help us when we actually debate in this House. But I want to talk about the substance of this bill today, Mr. Speaker. First of all, Mr. Speaker, as you know, I supported this bill at the second reading. Why? Because we, like everybody else in this House, do want to have measures that will enhance public safety. We do want to have measures that will enhance public safety. And it's because of that that we supported this bill at second reading, and it went to committee. And once again, once it got to committee, this government repeated the same mistakes that they make over and over again. They limited hearings on this. You know, Mr. Speaker, when you have such critical legislation that hasn't been debated or hasn't seen any changes for decades, there were some major changes that needed to be made. And we needed to hear from witnesses because, you know, Mr. Speaker, as much as we all like to think we're experts of everything, there are great experts out there we need to hear from who know far more about public safety in real terms than we do. They know what works. They've got evidence of what works from other jurisdictions and what will be good here in Canada. And our job is to listen to that. But you know, Mr. Speaker, 2 hours to hear from officials from the department, fair enough, but then 2 hours for witnesses, all other witnesses, that is just unacceptable. And I can assure you very, very concerning that when we're trying to address public safety in a serious way, the government once again used the hammer of their majority to push through legislation without giving it the due process and the oversight that it needed. And, Mr. Speaker, I don't even hesitate in opposing this legislation anymore because of what happened at committee. And you know, my colleagues across the way are saying, surprise, surprise. I would be saying, I am surprised that when it came to such a critical issue as public safety, that government, the members of that government, cut off debate and did not accept amendments that were very, very reasonable, amendments that were well informed, that actually would have improved this legislation. But oh no, that is a government that knows everything and doesn't need to hear from anyone else because it's their way or the highway. So that's the way they have brought the legislation forward. And then they're surprised when the opposition stands up and says, there are flaws in this legislation that need to be addressed. But you know, Mr. Speaker, we never give up. We will keep trying to improve this legislation and hoping that this government will wake up one day and realize that there is a different way of doing things if you're really, really serious. You're really serious. So what does C-44 do? It is making significant changes to expand CSIS powers. But instead of giving this bill the careful study it deserved, once again, this government didn't feel the need to hear from experts. They once again know what they want to do, and it's their way or the highway. And independent experts and other witnesses were ignored. This gives powers to CSIS without providing adequate oversight, and it presents real dangers. It presents real dangers because I fear, Mr. Speaker, that this government is going to end up spending taxpayers' hard-earned money on fighting more legal problems and having this legislation struck in courts. But you know, Mr. Speaker, they don't seem to mind doing that. They would rather pay the money to the courts than provide services and good legislation to Canadians. And, you know, even the witnesses who appeared, they put forward recommendations or suggestions, ignored. And so this bill is fundamentally flawed, Mr. Speaker, and there is no doubt about that. So it is going to be very, very hard to support this bill. What would we have wanted to see? Mr. Speaker, we should always say, what is it we want to see in legislation? I can point to lots of things that are wrong with it. I think what I wanted to see in the legislation that is not there is strong civilian oversight. Mr. Speaker, it's critical that enhanced civilian oversight accompany any new powers for CSIS. Look, everybody knows that the Security Intelligence Review Committee does not have the powers necessary to properly oversee CSIS. And the Conservatives used an omnibus budget bill in 2012 to eliminate the position of CSIS Inspector General. Once again, anybody who questions anything they do, let's just delete and get rid of that position. And you know, Mr. Speaker, what else this bill needs and what we want in this bill is to see strong protection of civil liberties. You know, Mr. Speaker, some people say we have to choose between public safety or civil liberties. I say that's a false dichotomy. I say that's a false dichotomy. In order to have good public safety, we need to have protection of civil liberties. In order to have protection of civil liberties, we need to ensure that we have strong public safety. They are both core Canadian values. And Canadians do not have to choose A or B. It is possible to have both. And once again, this government failed to address that. There are no trade-offs here. It's not one or the other. We can have both, Mr. Speaker, and that's what needs to be in this bill. And we, as New Democrats, want legislation that both improves security and reinforces our civil liberties. And that is really essential. The other thing is, you know, my colleagues across the way always talk a good game. Always talk a good game. All the rhetoric is there. But they're also a party that keeps cutting resources. You know, they want to have all these enhancements, but they've cut funding for our public safety agencies for 3 straight years for a total of almost $688 million by 2015. That's not a figure I've made up, Mr. Speaker. That's the figure for, that they can verify. So how can you say that you want to make improvements, but at the same time be taking millions of dollars in resources out of the CSIS budget? CSIS will also face ongoing cuts of $24.5 million by 2015, while Budget 2012 scrapped the CSIS Inspector General position altogether. So at the same time as you have this rhetoric, you know, oh yeah, we're going to make everybody safer, public safety is going to improve, what they're doing is they're taking away the tools and the resources that our agencies need in order to do that. So, as with many other things, it's all talk, and then when it comes to actually what this government does, they underfund, they cut, or they just don't spend the money even when they allocate it to certain programs. And you know, Mr. Speaker, I know you've just given me the signal. There's a myriad of validators who absolutely support the position we are taking as the NDP. And I wish I had time to read all of them into the record, but I know I'm short of time. But let me say, Mr. Speaker, this legislation can be fixed to get our support. So first, put strong civilian oversight in place. Second, protection of civil liberties. And then 3, let's give them the resources and get the job done. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.